Yeah.
I think they're just setting
The
up.
other Joshua too.
Yeah.
Hold on. Oh, Kel's texting me. Oh, we're live. Fantastic.
Oh, we stopped that conversation.
Hello.
Just in time. Hi, guys.
Hello, welcome everybody. This is the winner announcement for the November Self-Portrait Challenge. I'm your host, Joshua Jacobo, and I am joined here by my 3 generous judges who have taken time out of their busy schedules to judge your work and to pick the winners of the challenge. So first, I'll just go through the introductions quickly. Our first judge, Juliette Aristides, is a realist painter and founder of the Aristides Classical Atelier in Seattle, Washington. You probably know her from her books on drawing and painting. Her most recent books are Beginning Drawing Atelier and Figure Drawing Atelier. Her last book serves as a sort of self-study, modern-day bard course. It features drawings from several artists, including New Masters Academy's Glenn Villepeu, yours truly, as well as Stan Prokopenko, Colleen Barry, and a lot of other great artists. Definitely check that out if you haven't seen that book. If you're interested in Juliette's fine art, she has an upcoming solo show at Customs House Museum entitled A Life's Work. The best way to learn more about everything Juliette is her Instagram account. All of these links are going to be in the description for the YouTube video. So, and if you haven't checked out Juliette's course on New Masters Academy, it's fantastic. It's older, but it's very good. It's one of our earlier courses, but it is fantastic. So welcome, Juliette. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Joshua.
Okay, and we have for our second judge, Cornelia Hernez. Cornelia is a realist painter focusing on the portrait. She's a former instructor at the Florence Academy of Art, and she's the co-founder of the Atelier Forum, which is an online learning website. Cornelia teaches painting on her Patreon account as well. You can follow her on Instagram and check out her Patreon links in the description. Welcome, Cornelia.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
It's
thanks
great
for
to
being
be here.
here.
Thank you.
And we have our returning champion, returning judge, Mr. Ilya Marachnik. Ilya is a painter and he's an educator specializing in passing on the education he received over 8 years at the Repin Academy in St. Petersburg, Russia. You've probably seen his courses at New Masters Academy, where he's been the first artist to bring the Russian academic method to the internet in a comprehensive and accessible way. You can follow Ilya on Instagram as well. The links are in the description. And if you're interested in being mentored by Ilya, he's available as a coach through New Masters Academy's coaching program. So yeah, check the links. We'll have a link to the coaching program as well. So welcome, Ilya.
Thank you. Always good to be here.
Yes. So great, we all know each other. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. So just like last time we did the stream, we're gonna go through each of the different categories and we're gonna talk about our 3rd place, 2nd place, and 1st place winners. The judges are gonna discuss a little bit about what they liked about each of the pieces that we've had submitted. And because it's New Masters Academy, of course, we're also going to be giving some critique, feedback, room for improvement. So hopefully this will be educational as well. So without further ado, we have the first category is best use of medium. And just to clarify real quick, the assignment for anyone who's watching right now who didn't participate in the challenge, the assignment was to do a traditional self-portrait. Traditional meaning using a mirror, not using photographs. The challengers were able to use digital. They could draw on an iPad, for example, but it had to be looking at a mirror. So this is a challenging a task because especially if you're used to drawing from photos or if you're not used to working from a mirror or even if you're not used to drawing yourself. So this was it was really exciting to see everybody's results. I just want to say that we were sort of thrilled to see what everybody did with it. And it was really hard to come up with these. The judges had a hard time coming up with these choices. There was some contention. So hopefully we can all stand behind the results and we can talk a little bit about it. So best use of medium, our 3rd place category. And so I think we've got the image coming up right now. And this is Sean Simmons. Instagram is @VimesArt. And so, yeah, maybe the judges would like to talk a little bit about this piece.
Yep.
You got to call on us. There's no way.
Ilya, no problem. Ilya, why don't you go ahead and start out by tell us what you liked about this piece or a little bit about your thoughts on this piece.
What I like about this piece is that actually, I mean, and kind of the reason why it's in the medium category, I think to some degree, is that I think it's there is I imagine that this is either in Procreate or on Photoshop or some other app or program. And I think there's something here that I personally like. I like that that I'm seeing an influence um, of painting that isn't digital in this. So I think that kind of expands because there's like a lot of digital painting. It had its own stylistic qualities that pass from artist to artist, and there are some, and I think that and it's very easy to get caught, and there's more of it. There's much more of it always on the internet because that's just where it exists, right? So it's very easy to get caught up in that stylistic quality and instead take a look at maybe some art that isn't that, and then try to incorporate it. And I think that that's always very important. And also, I just think there's some there are some qualities in the portrait that are just like it feels alive. It seems observed. It seems like I believe this that he looks like him, and that's always like it seems as though this is like an honest effort.
How do you feel about that, Cornelia? Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a actually very traditional composition. It's a 3/4 profile, and then he has a direct eye contact with us, the viewers. So I think it's also interesting that kind of bridge between time, history, and the present, and kind of using sort of modern materials in the form of digital painting and combining it with traditional classical compositions as well. And I thought it was very interesting to actually evaluate the submissions for this competition, precisely because it was such a varied mediums that were presented as well. And I'm coming very much from a sort of traditional background, traditional drawing and painting. So I felt I had to kind of step a little bit outside of that perspective to see the work that was submitted on a very sort of neutral ground in a way, and try to kind of remove some of maybe the biases that I, probably have just because of the mediums I'm familiar with. And I connected with this one. I think also a little bit to do with these elements of the composition, but also if this was a oil painting, I would also find these qualities equally strong. Really nice design of the shadow shape, light shape, really good shape designs as well. So as we're looking at some of the shape configurations on the light shape, for example, we can see some really nice defined shapes, and also the articulation of how different planes kind of merge and work together. It's a very unfussy painting. It doesn't look like it's been labored, or polished a great deal, but it's a nice, immediate, strong expression and sort of impression, strong design. And I like the color harmonies as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So Cornelia, real quick, you mentioned the gaze. Is that something that is difficult to achieve in a portrait? You think that sense of presence, where it really feels like the sitter is looking at us?
This is actually a very classical way to obtain exactly that, this sideways gaze. When you look at this painting, which will be, or a digital image, and you move around the room, you really get that sense that the eyes are tracking you.
This is creepy.
Yes, exactly. Sort of like Mona Lisa sideways gaze. It's very effective for that. So it's a type of expression that absolutely generates that kind of communication and contact in a very sort of classical way. So it's a very effective way to obtain eye contact. Yeah.
So Julia, do you have any thoughts on what you liked about this piece that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so a couple of the things that I liked about it. Number one was the coloring. There's very sensitive handling with the temperature, very subtle shifts in temperature, and strong cools in the hair. And I also loved some of the observed shapes that Cornelia was talking about. They're not overly generic. They're simplified, but not ill-observed, which is a tricky thing to do. And so are we piggybacking our critique along with our praise, or are you going to be...
That'll be the next part. So if you want to just transition into the critique side, then we can come back to Ilya and Cornelia.
Yeah, so I just encourage you, Sean, just to continue to do what you have been doing, which is careful observation. So some of the lines, like for example, the line from the ear down to the neck, to the edge of the shirt, some sensitivity in terms of breaking up some of the angles there would just be wonderful. Just a continuation and encouragement to go a little deeper down that rabbit hole now that you're exploring things carefully, and also the hair against the background. So it's really a lovely portrait, and so bravo to you for doing that, and then just continuation along that line.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I think it's interesting that we mentioned sensitivity, but at the same time, confidence, like confident shapes, yet sensitive handling. And it seems to me like that's something that's we want to strive for in our work. So going along with the critique or the room for improvement, Ilya, do you want to jump in and say maybe where this artist could continue to work?
Well, I mean, I think since this is kind of the thing I tend to teach a lot, right? I'll talk about. I think there's some anatomical issues which would be good to address, like this, especially the orbit of the eye, kind of the important eye, right? The one that's kind of half in light and half in shadow. There is no the zygomatic, the bone itself is too high, and so it doesn't quite. It looks like it's sort of jamming into the sort of triangular inner corner underneath the eye, and that just can't exist, right? It just has to be a continuous orbit with its own particular angles. I would say the hair also, the edge of the hair to the background 100%, right? But also to the head itself. I think it just needed to, there should be some more control of edges. And I think you have a little bit of it, but it could be emphasized in terms of even more. And then, of course, the anatomy. I think the eye is the thing that's like really jumping out. The angle of the mandible also probably needs to be rounded off a little bit more. And I see there's an attempt at that. And of course, the sternocleidomastoid and all of that down here. And probably the lighter values on the neck itself could have come down a bit so that our eye moves up to the head.
Yeah, it's interesting that the lightest part of the skin is the neck, but not the head. Do you think that was an intentional choice?
I mean, it could have. That could have been what you saw, Sean. But I'm not so sure you always need to do what you see.
Okay, that was really useful. Cornelia, do you have some advice for Sean on how he can continue to improve?
Yeah, sure. I think this is great advice from Juliette and Ilya for sure. When we are translating nature from 2D, from three dimension into 2 dimension, we constantly have to find ways to translate the manifestation of structure. And shape design is such a key element to that. And in terms of shape design, that's also quite an infinite category. We can talk about shadow shape, light shape, and kind of those puzzle pieces. And then we can talk about transitional halftone shapes, and how they are articulated through a variation of values that then create structure and translate anatomy. So when we work with interaction of shadow and light, it's so crucial that when we really look at that very specific rhythm and melody in that meeting point. And I do think it's strong here, but I also think that that is an element that can certainly be pushed further moving forward, looking at the kind of larger planes, of course, of the shadow shape, but also a little bit more the minute elements, so the kind of micro structures that tend to appear, especially around the forms such as the nose, where there is such a active shape activity as a result of those, as a result of the protrusion of the nose. So we see a lot of value variations and a lot of shape variation around such an area. So I could see the potential of a little bit more kind of specific shadow shape in moments, and also just a little bit more dark halftone activity that can really connect that shadow shape to the light shape with an increasing range of structure.
All right. Yeah. Fantastic.
Also another thing too, in terms of the key, because this is really low key, the light is very muted, and that's actually something that I quite like with this composition. It's not that one have to have a very dramatic light effect between shadow and light. It's helpful that there is some contrast there though, so that one have some light effect and form to work with. I would maybe suggest that if you do push the contrast a little bit further, you may have a little bit more room for your halftones, and that I think would be a great study forward as well. So I could see the potential of the halftone, like right below the eye on the light shape side, that particular plane that connect the eye to the mouth, for example. Like if that was a little bit darker, that would offset and make a greater distinction between the front plane to the side plane of the face. So there are some things that one can explore there.
All right, yeah, fantastic. So hopefully that's taken in the spirit in which it's given, Sean. So congratulations,
Great job.
fantastic work. Yeah, so Sean, you're going to be winning a Master Box, which is a partnership with New Masters Academy and Faber-Castell, which includes a lot of the fantastic pencils, if you haven't seen this, and other drawing materials. Also, you're going to be winning a copy of Juliette's latest book as well that we mentioned earlier, Figure Drawing Atelier and Instructional Sketchbook. So congratulations, and yeah, fantastic work. So, and I just wanted to let everybody know, because I'm seeing some of the chat coming in from online. We're getting greetings from around the world: Stuttgart, Montreal, Turkey, Iran, Ukraine, another person in Germany, Las Vegas. So thank you everybody who's joining us live on YouTube as well. So we really appreciate you being part of this. So yes, let's go ahead and move to our second place winner for best use of medium. Okay, and so this is Hector Acuna. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. So I don't know if it's Hector or Hector. Maybe I'll just go with the English version for now. So yeah, this is our second place. Maybe let's go ahead and start with the things we liked about the piece. So maybe Cornelia, if you would like to begin the discussion there.
Yes, okay. Yeah, I really did like the sort of strong kind of graphic design element in this composition, how there is sort of the figures in front, of course, offset with a lighter background. And then we see these sort of forms that also helps to frame, in a way, the portrait. So I really do like sort of these larger shapes and how that all comes together. I also enjoy the kind of texture of the brush strokes, and the brush application right here it feels very immediate, very large, kind of large brushes, large planes, but there is still sort of a foundation of structure. I tend to also observe through the lens of color a lot. So I actually thought that the color composition element was quite clever too, because you have the kind of primary color composition. You have yellow background, blue shirt, blue element in the background, and then a red portrait. And that really stands out because it's sort of the singular color element, maybe apart from the arms a little bit, that have a trickle of the red too. So I kind of like the harmony of those elements. It took me a while, actually, until I saw the 2020 sucks. And I thought it was kind of nice that it was sort of one of those elements that kind of revealed itself as I sort of spent some time observing the painting.
Sort of cleverly backwards, of course, because it's a mirror. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Ilya, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
It's sort of, yeah, that was kind of what appealed to me about this portrait. I like the handling of the paint particularly. Yeah, and it does create a graphic kind of quality because it has this sort of a sharp edge quality. And I think I would stylistically, I haven't seen your other pieces obviously, but I would imagine that there is I'd be curious to see more of what you accomplish with this kind of stylistic approach, which I happen to enjoy. And I think you actually managed to get some really interesting edge quality using it, which is not easy to do, right? Because it has to happen on its own. It can't be kind of it's not very controlled in that sense. I mean, you can kind of get a sharp edge, but it's harder to get a softer edge in a way that reads convincingly. What I actually think is interesting, and is that the eyes are sort of not painted like everything else, right? They're painted in a way that's a lot more controlled, and there's like just the tonality and all that stuff there, and that is interesting. And that's usually my own that's the thing the students in my classes don't understand, if interesting means good or bad. So and I don't know either if that's what I mean, but I like it. It's interesting. So like
Yeah.
there's a chance that there's like in my eyes that could be stylistically, it tears it apart a little bit, which is also good. Or the contrast is good too, right? So I don't know. There's a lot here I liked, and I mean, of course, I like that you accented the 2020 sucks because it did.
Well, Julia, maybe you can offer some thoughts, and then also we can start to transition into the critique side, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so this is digital painting, right?
Actually, don't know. I can look up the work in progress.
Yeah, because I went to it as painting, and to me it looks like it's got. I don't. Yeah, I'd be very curious to.
Yeah, I'll look up the work in progress images right now as you speak.
Yeah, definitely 2020 has been the absolute worst year ever. So I agree that he probably got a lot of points for the T-shirt. And there's kind of an awkwardness that is, there's awkwardness that's unappealing and awkwardness that is appealing, and this kind of falls into the category of one that it's got like a slight retro quality to it that is fun and kind of a cross between comic book art and high art, kind of trying to straddle a little bit between that. In terms of composition, really watch out for any shape that touches one another becomes one shape. So if you have both posters and that, the poster, the whiteboard, and the head become one shape set against a different shape, which is the background. One of the things that could have perhaps unified a little bit is finding more color notes and transition notes in the wall behind. That might help unify the image a little bit. So you're getting a lot of really nice color notes in the face and in the neck and perhaps in the arm and the shirt, and then finding that in the back wall also. That's just a personal opinion.
Yeah, Juliette too. I just found his work in progress images. It does look like it's oil. It looks like it's done traditionally.
Okay, if it's done traditionally, you have a lot of room to play with edges, and so my big feedback would be explore and have fun with the edges as well. But congratulations, Hector. We're glad that you participated.
Yeah, excellent. That was really, really useful words there. Cornelia, do you have anything to add to the suggestions on how to improve on what Juliette said?
I think that's an excellent comment, and about edge work too. I mean, there's just so much that one can do with that, and I think that this does read as a little bit more flat, but that does give it that slightly retro, but also contemporary translation almost into the oil painting. Now, if you did want to have a little bit more depth of field, then of course, really working with a bit more softening of the edges in the images behind is going to make a huge difference. But I also do see that you have the contrast of the value and the color that helps to offset that sense of distance between him and the background. So I think I get a little bit where you're going with this as well. But it's also interesting, I think, in a painting to have maybe some areas that have a little bit more three-dimensional translation to contrast with areas that are a little bit more textured and a little bit more abstracted. So I would be interested to see if how you can explore that as well.
Do you think the wall, how we're oriented in the picture, playing with the wall, do you think that is part of what's flattening it out?
The wall element, that's one element, but I think if you look at the contour of the chair, for example, there's a little bit more sense of distance there, just because it's a little bit softer, just he hasn't kind of rendered it so much. So it's not necessarily just the surface itself, but as Juliette pointed out, it has to do with the connecting edge between different forms and how they interact with each other. So you have the cast shadow of the painting behind him that is blue. That's a razor sharp edge right there, and it's just like hits him, a little bit right there. if that was soft, he would get a sense of perspective and distance. But maybe that's not kind of what you were going for entirely as well. But of course, it's always interesting to talk about edge quality, because that's where you're going to find perspective and atmosphere. And if that's something that one wants to do, then one really have to think about softer edges in contrast to the focal point edges.
I see. Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Ilya, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm looking at on your Instagram, Hector, at all your other stuff. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's really cool. It's completely crazy. This is like the calmest thing that I'm seeing. But also, I do think, this is a strange critique, right? Because I can see this work, but I do think that you do tend to like you work from imagination, you work from images, right? And there's something about the way you're working from images where you're relying on them in a way that I think is clearly intentional, and you're exaggerating these photographic qualities, which you didn't do here because you just observed this. I would play with a bit of that. I'd play with just seeing what working in the style you have, but from directly of like observing, not from a photograph, can add to the work that you do from photographs. Though I don't think you need to really, like, it's just about your intention, which I do clearly see you think about. Yeah, I do think that in this case, I would have probably, and even like, I think you would have also, in a strange way, looking at your work. I don't think you needed the highlight on the head, and just the highlights on the head to be the exact same color as the background. I would have, like, they could be ridiculous and chromatic and something completely out of place, but not the background. And that would have been also the arms being cut off at the bottom like that seems a little strange. It's taking me out of the picture. And I think, especially if you're accenting the flatness of the plane, you want to keep us in the picture, which is kind of, if we're thinking as modernists here, right? Like, which I think you probably are.
All right, yeah. So congratulations, Hector. You're going to be receiving the same prize as third place, which is the book and then master box. So yeah, great work. So okay, now we've arrived at our first place winner of the best use of medium, and this is Pedro Cardoso, and this is this was a piece that I think I remember just from the conversations that the judges all seem to connect with. So maybe we'll mix it up, and this time, Juliette, if you don't mind, you can start by saying some of the things that you liked about Pedro's piece here.
Yeah, first of all, congratulations, because this is really nicely done. All of us really liked your piece a lot. And one of the things, people had disagreement about how much they loved the green or didn't love the green. Get to go first, so I get to tell you that I love the green, and so and don't take it out for what the other judges might say. One of the things that I really love about this piece is the level of information and observation that you're getting in through the light on the skull in the background, and the brushes and the coffee cup, and the light across a hand and in the back of the neck. And some of those same beautifully found forms in the face. And just to avoid looping back to me, I'll just also piggyback my critique. Well, another thing I really like is that little bit of the palette sneaking out in front. It'd be great to be able to have that level of observation in the pants and in your shirt and in proportion of the figure overall. And so if you're going to get that beautifully detailed in the back, be sure that the most important part, which is yourself, gets that same level of observation. It's overly simplified, and I'd actually go back in and rework it a little bit, because even a small amount of finding of those shapes in the pants and perhaps suggesting an ellipse where the shirt hits the pants rather than just a straight line would also help to create enough ambiguity and kind of weirdness of edge that the eye actually won't look there. So sometimes the more we leave things flat and unobserved because they're not interesting to us, they gain in the attention that it attracts from somebody else. So it's kind of a little bit more love, and it will go away. So.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Juliette. That's fantastic. Would the rest of the judges, would we prefer to do it that way? Like you can just start with the positives, go right into the critique, so instead of coming back around? What do you guys think?
Fine with me.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go to Ilya then. And Ilya, you can talk a little bit about this piece.
I think it's good. I am the I imagine I'm the one who had some issues with the green. I think that there's a great painting by Konstantin Korovin, who was a sort of impressionist painter from the early 20th century, but probably like the edge between the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, who had a lot of paintings in this kind of atmosphere where they were against a light that was sort of kind of a bit calmer. It wasn't as I mean, yeah, there's a lot of paintings that he has in a light that's like this, and I think you handled it quite well because there's not only the light coming from outside, but there's just an ambience inside, which I think is handled well. And it's actually I think the reason I don't like the green is not because the green itself, because I don't have any issues with that. But my concern is that you have a lot of very the colors inside the painting, if you will, inside the room are very interesting and complex. A lot of the grays and all of this, and I think the green is sort of flat. It could actually be even more chromatic, more complex. Is my however, I don't want to actually make that as an overall kind of judgment, because that could just be the image, right? It might be something completely different in life, because we always have to kind of think about that. Now, as a critique, a lot of my colleagues might point out the sort of large amount of tangents, which some people are not a fan of. I'm not saying my colleagues here exclusively, but also colleagues in general, right? There are a number of tangents of the edge of the table to the hand, and then sort of parallels. The palette in front, the way it's just a tangent against the pant leg, right? Everything is sort of right up against everything else. I don't care as much, so I just thought I'd bring that up as a critique, even though I wouldn't sign my name under it 100%. A few of them I would, right? Just overlapping a few things, but I'm a big fan of the arms. The arms are great, and the head is great. There's a lot of to capture that ambience of light inside the room against the light outside of the room. It's hard to do, and I think you did a great job with it.
Ilya, do you think it's successful how the head is not the most contrasting, not the most resolved, not in some ways not the most important thing in the portrait? Instead, it's the skull, it's some of these other areas. What do you think about that choice? Yeah, the hand. What do you think?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I mean, I would I think anything that goes against this. I mean, a portrait's always going to be it's a good challenge, right? Because we're automatically going to look at the head, regardless, right? We're looking at the head because we're programmed to look at the head. So if you're playing with that and moving us away from it, then awesome. There've been a lot of portraits with a lot of heads.
That is true. That's the hot take. You're hearing it here first, folks. So Cornelia, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you,
Ilya. Well, first of all, congratulations on the first prize, Pedro, of this genre. I think it's really well deserved. I think this is one of the more ambitious paintings in many ways that we saw in this competition, especially just in terms of how you have composed, because you added so many elements. So it's not just the portrait itself, it's the space surrounding you and how that also reflects who you are and what you do. And I think that's also a very interesting element of portraiture, which, by the way, we haven't gotten into, but I'm sure we can discuss in great length, because self-portraits are particularly challenging, because it comes down to also how are you going to portray yourself and the psychology of that, which I think is fascinating. And especially also maybe when we live in this selfie world where there is so much idea of presenting oneself, in a successful, beautiful way. And it's always a little bit of an initial conflict to kind of get past that or those ideas and to kind of hit the person that you are and to translate some element of that. And I think that this encompasses a bit of that, because I see that you're painting in this beautiful sunlit studio. You're very focused, and you have books, and you have a animal skull, and you're sort of surrounded with this element that is a part of what you do and what you're interested in as well. So I really enjoy that angle to the self-portrait, including the space and kind of bringing in some element of still life to also illustrate an aspect of yourself. In terms of the composition, I really like the green. I love color myself.
Just log off.
I love color. That's my problem with the green. That's all. Okay. I'm sorry.
I like it actually, because I know I actually have painted a self-portrait in a silhouette in a southwest window, actually, so not indirect, and you get that direct light shining through. That silhouette is very strong, and it presents some interesting challenges about like how much are you going to include, because if you squint down, you can easily disappear as a dark form against this light shape. So I think here you have a really interesting balance between that translation of intense light and luminosity outside to what you see kind of yourself. So when I squint, I actually see your silhouette, and then I open my eyes, I can actually see your portrait and the amount of details. That balance is really nicely done.
Yeah.
And I also know in a way that kind of green, verdant landscape that you're going for, and probably the colors that you had there were not strong enough. Nature sometimes is so extremely iridescent. It's
We
even
agree, Cornelia.
what?
So we agree, Cornelia.
We agree. I also like how you allow that trickle of green. I can see that green throughout the whole compositions. I can see it in the reflection of the light on the animal skull. I can even see it in your shadow a little bit. So you use that to neutralize some of the red tones in the flesh tints. And that's a really nice way to create a contrast point as well as a continuation or a connection between these different areas. In terms of the tangents, I actually like that as well, because I know it's really hard to do, to find a balance point when you have so many vertical and horizontal and diagonal. But I can see that you did consider that. I don't really see any issue with that so much. And I completely agree about the shorts. That it's not the first thing that I look at all, but when I look at it, it's like, oh no, you need to repair that. Because that is dragging the complete painting down. Because we look at the skull, we look at the books, it's beautiful, 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 and then those shorts, got to do something about that.
Yeah, actually, Pedro is actually in one of the YouTube chats, and he's saying, "Thank you so much for the critiques." He's saying, "I like the green debate. I'm in Brazil, where it would be a sin not to paint the green," is what he said.
Yeah.
I have no issue with that. Of course.
Yeah. Well, yeah, fantastic. It was really thoughtful feedback. And also, something Cornelia was talking about. We have an article on Canvas, which is New Masters Academy's online magazine, that's specifically on the contrast and the intersection between selfie and how we present ourselves on social media and the traditional portrait. So I would check that out if anyone's interested in that. It's by Masha Savitz. It's a really nice piece. So yeah, congratulations, Pedro. You're going to be winning a 1-year scholarship to New Masters Academy, which is worth several $100s. So congratulations on that. And of course, you're getting the Juliette Aristides book, and you're getting the master box. So fantastic job. Awesome. And yeah, and thanks for interacting live with us. Yeah, great work. Okay, so we have the next category now. The next category is best technical skill. And our third place is by Purushottam Pawar. And I need to make a little note right at the beginning here, because there might be some responses to this in Discord. We did have one submission by this artist that was done prior. He hadn't read the rules in their entirety, but this one was done for the challenge. And so in this case, this was not a disqualification. This piece was we saw the entire work. So yeah, this is a fun one. I think there was some interesting discussion about this piece, if I remember from the conversation. So Cornelia, maybe this time you'd like to start us off, and then you can just sort of start with what you liked, transition into the critiques, and we can just sort of do it like that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this painting, of course, is very striking, and there's a translation of a wonderful mood. Or maybe the mood in the painting is not wonderful, but the reaction, I think, is very humorous and very self-ironic too. And I appreciate that. And it may be a bit happy, and maybe that's a bit of a strange reaction because the expression itself is a bit sort of dramatic. But of course, it's an image that is a reflection of, I think, it's humor, it's humorous, it's self-ironic, and it's also kind of portraying the madness a little bit, that mad aspect, the funny aspect of yourself. And I appreciate that translation and kind of diving into that element of the self-portrait as well. And it translates. It's very vivid, and I think it's interesting with the eyes and in a way the teeth. We can see the bottom part of the upper teeth a little bit, so perspective is low. It's this humorous kind of sprinkles throughout the self-portrait. So I first of all, I was caught by the expression. In terms of the qualities of the painting, you have that combination of representational, but a little bit cartoony as well, because there are certain areas that are like the shirt, for example, is very classic in a way. And then, of course, the eyes are perhaps a bit sort of exaggerated. The expression is exaggerated, and then, of course, that is translated into the painting. And I actually think it works really well. That harmony between lost and found edges in the area of the shirt, for example, element of softness in the area of the hair, in contrast with some sort of softer and lighter values within the eyes. Those are technical aspects that actually carries forth. And I think this brings us to an interesting point that are there anything as bad ideas in a way we can translate if we have the technique to translate what we want, then we have the liberty of that communication. So I think you did a bold self-portrait, a lot of humor. I appreciated that. I also really like that kind of technical aspects, sort of moving forward. Critique-wise, there definitely some moments are generalized, like the nose, the plane of the nose. I would anticipate a little bit more shape configuration there. Also around the chin, the way that shadow shape kind of sweeps a little bit too softly. I think you could probably fish out a little bit more structure in the area of the chin. The area below the eyes get a little bit foggy. They kind of get lost a little bit into perspective, which is nice. But there's maybe, would have been a little bit of structure that could have been extracted from that area also. So there's a little bit more to nitpick. I'm going to leave it to my colleagues now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know if you, Pusha Tom, I don't know if you looked at our inspiration album of famous painters and their work. So I'm guessing you looked at Joseph Ducreux, who was a famous 18th century painter who would do these like crazy expressions and try to capture this moment. I mean, before photography was available. So I think it was interesting that you chose this as the challenge. Juliette, do you want to weigh in on this piece and maybe add to what Cornelia was saying?
Yeah, I'll just bring up a couple points. So there's a long history of fine art and high art mixed with kind of caricature. You can think of like Daumier and even going back earlier than him in terms of kind of straddling what is humorous and confrontational and has a big impact with something that also feels like fine or high art if you want to. And there's, I guess, we could have a vigorous debate about where one begins and one ends. And so this portrait was striking. It's not easy to convey emotion. It's not easy to do a self-portrait just straight, looking at yourself in the mirror. And so to be able to take such a gamble, it was a risk and a playful risk. And we appreciated that you took that effort and that you put yourself out there for this. But one of the things that I would recommend, perhaps, as you explore your work and go further, is not to lose the gutsy quality and the sort of moment that's just kind of captured right at the second that you're seeing it, which is wonderful. but also to try to get some of the more carefully observed elements. Like, for example, I feel like we're missing a little bit of the back of the skull. It feels like that side of the head is a little bit small. And then when you head down, from the side of the head down through the lip part of the cheek and into the neck, um, it'd be wonderful to be able to look for a level of nuance and observation. So you're capturing a strong character of yourself, but not capturing some of those uniquely loved qualities that make something feel like they're really, really well observed. And you're getting that in the shirt. You're getting this lovely, like luminous background, and then connecting the head to the background. That's super important. So as you go ahead in your career and continue to do your painting, I would give you a big push in that direction because you won't lose what makes you unique. You'll just add. You'll just add a lot.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great advice. So let's hear from our third judge on this one, which would be Mr. Mrochnik. Do you have something to say about this piece? I know you fought hard for this one.
I did. I did. I like it for all the qualities that my colleagues here praised it for, right? So that I did think that kind of element of caricature, without, in my opinion, pushing it completely into caricature, is a hard balance to keep, and I think it's done quite well here. From a technical standpoint, I personally think, and I see now, and I've looked up some other, and I thought of it at the time too, but I wasn't certain that this is done in gouache or in gouache and watercolor, right? So this is like, in terms of just the use of the medium, I think it's very good use of the medium in a very particular kind of a history of illustration, right? Especially illustration that's being done right now. In my opinion, this is of in terms of just of like, if you look at contemporary portraiture within the field of illustration, this could be in it easily.
What makes this look like an illustration piece more than, let's say, a fine art piece? I know those lines are not clear.
Oh man, that's a tough one. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think just in the way that it's painted, I think it's painted in the technique of like the sort of mixture of watercolor and gouache that a lot of illustrators who still use those media in general, which is not that common anymore, right? It's all digital, so that kind of preserves that. And on top of that, it is the sort of the elements of caricature, right? That push it into as well into illustration. Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was good.
Oh yeah. So congratulations to Purushottam. Yeah, it was well earned, third place.
And I agree with critiques, by the way. I agree with all the other critiques as well. So yeah, it's true. Like, so there are parts that could be a little bit more observed, a bit more careful.
Yeah, I think what Juliette said about the cranium is important to note, because if we're looking up at the head, and the glasses show that really well, that we're looking up at the head, then you got to remember the cranium is going to be low, and maybe we're not seeing as much of that. The cranium should be wider and lower in view, don't you think?
It could be, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it would have to be. I think that's the magic of the. It can hide behind the illustration often, right? Because like, if there's no cranium, you're kind of okay with it because you're like, it's an illustration. But that's a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, actually. So that's what I'm talking about here.
All right.
But yes,
yeah.
If we were going to be accurate, then yes.
So yeah. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just want to say too, nobody mentioned the glasses, but they're really well designed. Including the perspective and the kind of underside of the red design there. So they are very solid without actually taking to any attention away from the expression. It's really
cool. I think the cast shadow on the glasses on the near side is kind of interesting, how it shapes the cheekbone. I thought that was a nice little touch. Yeah, so congratulations. So let's go ahead and move to our second place. So our second place winner under the category of Best Technical Skill is Christian Maslach. Hope I pronounced that correctly. And yeah, this is a really interesting piece. So maybe this time, Juliette, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, we can talk a little bit about Christian's piece.
One of the things that I liked about this piece is the way that you can feel the three-dimensional structure of each of the planes of the head, the underside of the jaw and the underside of the lip, the bridge of the nose, and that sort of heavy brow. And the hatching I thought was very effective as well. It also, like the other piece, this is a conversation I think that we're having a lot now that we're discussing them through the judging, is deciding what you want to be, what you want the work to be as you move ahead. This also spans the tradition of caricature and has a little bit of humor because of the slight exaggeration of each of those features and each of the forms as well. And when I was a student, I used to worry that the more rendered something got, or the more specifically observed something got, and the less punchy the values were, that it would become finicky and soft and lose some of the impact. And one of the things that I've been able to appreciate as I've exposed myself over the years in art and through my training is that you don't really need to be afraid of the extremes. Sometimes when you meet and be extremely vigorous in the structure of the drawing and extremely well observed in terms of the nuances, and all art tends to play within the spectrum of those. And I think of it as the universals and the particulars. And the more it slides to the universals, the more broadly seen it becomes, and the less actually seen it is. And so, I love all the whole spectrum of it, and I would encourage you to take your serious side as well and explore that. But we did appreciate so much about this very strong portrait.
Wow, yeah, fantastic. Ilya, would you like to add on to that?
I liked that. I liked that. Yeah, that was a good idea. I think on top of this, we should just have like a live conversation about all these things we're talking about. Because there's a lot more. Like,
we're starting a podcast right now. You heard
it
here.
Right this second. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. I agree with a lot of that. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, but I'll be specific about it. I do think that there are. I mean, I've looked at your other pieces, and I think that you really have played with these stylistic qualities quite well, and I think they're relatively. And you keep them consistently in all of your pieces, which is good. And at times, I think they also, right, like the same critique I had earlier, right, where I think in this case you looked actually at yourself, where you're probably more accustomed to looking at images, and you could see that in some of the when you look at an image, right, you can spend. It's easier to be specific in a way that's not always that good, right? In a way that doesn't tie into everything else.
Do you think, Ilya, that when you're working from photography, there's a risk of what Juliette was talking about more and more resolution and maybe pulling you further from your design or fuller from your artistic statement? Do you also see that as a dichotomy about a generalization and a design versus getting more and more incidental and specific?
Well, I think it's obvious if you look at when artists worked from older photographs, which were not as clear, the work improved. The work was a lot better than what you can get right now with this image that has absolutely everything that you need. It takes you out of it. And I personally, I didn't realize one could work from photos until I was about to graduate college. Which is, I was like, and I discovered now, like, oh my God, like it blew my mind.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you weren't allowed to, or it wasn't part of your training?
It never occurred to me. Huh. I wasn't allowed to. Like, I mean, like, you could have done my homework using photos, but it just wouldn't occur to me.
Can I ask that of the judges, like just generally speaking, do you all use photographs in your work? Are you forced to use them sometimes? Do you try not to? I'm just curious.
At this point, it's like my favorite thing.
Wow.
Because it's so good, because I actually have now like inverted this problem that we're talking about. Like I am free to invent color. I'm free to make adjustments because I'm much more like because I try to be much more accurate when I'm looking at at a thing in life or a person in life. But a photo, I'm like, it's distorted anyway. Who cares? So you can kind of make adjustments and compose. So I've kind of flipped this problem for myself. I like working with photos a lot right now. Yeah, I know. I mean, I like working from observation as well. It's great. I just found that it's it opens up some things, and there's sometimes you want some qualities that are photographic that you can then have. My idea would be a combination of both.
Cornelia, did you want to add to that question I asked, or just maybe just talk about the piece?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a kind of a similar background as well. When I was a student, the focus was on working from life only. And then now working with portrait painting tutorials, a lot of my painting process stems from photographic reference, because otherwise it wouldn't be possible to do what I'm doing. So, and I do enjoy it. I completely agree with Ilya. I like that combination because there's pros and cons. There is elements that one can only get from life. There are elements and sort of liberty to the composition that is very beneficial to use photography. Photography is a very helpful tool. And, there are issues with it, and then there are absolute benefits to it. And I think it's in that kind of discussion more interesting to talk about the benefits or the disadvantages. And one of the disadvantages, if one only work from photograph, is that one don't get so familiar with editing. It's easy to kind of get a little bit enslaved by the image. Whereas if you know how to work from life, you know a little bit more, how to edit. And for example, work with edge design to work with perspective and kind of pick and choose a little bit as you do when you work from life. So I think there's some interesting elements there that one can absolutely have long discussions about.
Yeah, they'll have to be for our podcast episode. So, do you have something to add about your take on Christian's piece?
Yes, I do. So first of all, congratulations, Christian. I thought that was a very strong drawing. I completely agree with Juliette and Ilya's reflections as well. And also that would be very interesting to even push the kind of realism element. That's a little bit of a weird thing to say, I know, but a little bit more naturalistic element, I think, because there's some qualities here that are so good. You have very textured cross hatching, and my favorite part of this drawing is the jaw and the side plane right here. I think that's particularly strong. And I know that cross hatching technique is something that a lot of students question a little bit, or they don't fully understand, or it's a little bit of a mystery. I like to almost say it like this, that cross-hatching is a little bit like mathematics, in the sense that mathematics is a human constructed language that we have created to communicate different natural phenomenon. And it's just very effective at communicating, formulas of the universe, etc. And cross-hatching is a little bit like that, because of course in nature we don't actually see lines. So we can use cross-hatching as a way to communicate three-dimensional form. And reality is that anything that is three-dimensional is fluid. Planes don't move in the direction, they move in all kinds of directions, but we can use cross-hatching as a way to communicate, like how there is this web of different structures and planes and shapes that are intersecting each other. And that's exactly what you're doing. And I thought that was quite interesting about in the area of the chin, where you actually have a ground layer that is very soft. You soften that in some way and lost the structure. And then you went over it again with your cross-hatching lines to bring back that structure. And that gives a really interesting combination of atmosphere unity and structural definition. So there's some really fantastic sort of tools that you're using here. Brilliant. And by the way, I'd advise you to also look at zone etchings, because there's a link here, I think, between what we're talking about. Looking at some of Zorn's etchings are very human, very realistic, but a lot of textural cross-hatching. I think that would be interesting inspiration, maybe. The critique I have is I really wish that the design of the shadow shape of the nose and the shadow shape of your eyes was stronger. To me, that's the elements that bring the image down a little bit, because I know that there is so much that you can grab from that shadow shape, finding a little bit more specific shape design there, and also working with a little bit more of a precise dark halftone that can connect the shadow shape of the eyes to the surrounding light shape of the forehead. It's a bit more there.
Yeah, that's really fantastic work. I'm just being aware of time right now, so I don't know if our judges have to take off. We're actually closing in on the hour right now. So one thing we might be able to do is just sort of try to speed up on the critiques. It's fascinating. I wish we could be here all day, but I'm just trying to be mindful of everybody's time. So Julia, I don't know if you wanted to comment on the photography conversation or not. Would you like to add something to that?
I can save that for the podcast, but
sure.
I think, and everyone makes art for different reasons, and some people make art for the image that they get from the art. I mean, that makes sense because you're after an image, right? But the difference of the experience of creating art and the process of making art, when you're actually observing something, it becomes a collaboration. It's not, what you're looking at is not your slave in quite the same way it is when you've captured it in one particular moment. The light is fixed, everything is fixed in one particular moment, and you manipulate it as you will. When you're working from life, it is an undeniable collaboration, especially if you're working from natural light or a figure, and also working with the figure over days or weeks, that also changes as well. But that's all a conversation for another day.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, I know. I'd love to get it more into these topics. So then let's go ahead and move to our first place winner for best technical skill. And again, congratulations, Christian. And our first place winner is Antonio Lones. And this was something that I know there was a lot of love from the judges on aspects of this. And maybe Cornelia, you could start us off by talking about this piece and your thoughts on it.
All right. And feel free to direct a little bit the time, because I know I start babbling and then I don't know how much time I take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just cut your mic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, first of all, congratulations on a beautiful drawing, Antonio. This is very sophisticated, and you so deserve to be a first prize winner in this category, in best technical skill. The element I love about this drawing is that you have a very reduced value spectrum, but then you actually put in a lot of variation and a lot of nuance within that perspective. It's one of these drawings that are not jumping from the page because you don't have a lot of contrast, but then when you spend time with it, it reveals itself. And I really love that. This is a drawing that you spend time with, and then you see all this nuance that are coming out. It's very, very beautiful. I think there's a very convincing structure to the nose and to the mouth. The mouth is beautifully drawn, again, with a very compact perspective or a spectrum of dark and light. So this, I think, illustrates very well that we don't necessarily need dramatic contrast between dark and light. We just need to organize the values very well within the perspective, within the spectrum that we have allotted for ourselves. So, and I think that you did that beautifully.
Yeah, that's interesting, especially with like Instagram and social media. You're trying to get attention with your images. I don't know if the other judges have noticed this, but I've noticed that over the past few years, the contrast has just gone through the roof. It's like we're going full value range on every piece, probably because of the digital format. I think that's an interesting point you brought up. Did you have more on this particular piece, Cornelia, or should we move on to Juliette?
There's lots more I can talk about, but
just in the interest of time, I think we'll try to maybe just think of like your top positive in your top critique for now. If
Right. So
makes
the
sense.
rendering is my top positive. The structure, the balance between these contrasts, top positive. Structure of the contour of the portrait, really strong. I also really like that you punched your value anchor point to the contour, because that's a bit of a bold move in many ways. I would have been reluctant to do that myself. I would have wanted to bring in a bit of a softer contour there to push more focus into the portrait itself. But so from far away, we see that contour more, but coming up close to the image, that's when this information reveals itself and that contrast point doesn't jump out in the same way. So I thought that kind of working with kind of the optical play between contrast and information, and how when, seeing the different elements as when I'm viewing different distances to the artwork is really lovely as well. I like that textural variation too, a little bit more rougher texture in the hair, a little bit more refined texture in the area of the skin. I thought that was very suitable.
Does this remind you of Silver Point? That was one thing I was thinking when I first saw it.
Definitely. Definitely. I thought maybe it was, and then I thought, well, it can't be because that contrast is so strong. So he's really pushing the contrast on the contour.
Yeah.
I wonder a little bit about the proportion of the eyes. I mean, I like the structure of them, but I wonder if they are a little bit small. But then I don't know if that's the case or not. But there's a convincing kind of physical symmetry. I just question a little bit some of the volume there, if anything. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic thoughts on that. We really appreciate it. Juliette, do you have something to add? Maybe your thoughts on this particular piece?
Yeah, I deeply appreciate it, the sensitivity in the portrait, and it takes a lot of courage to make something this straightforward and unadorned and kind of put it out there to stand against paintings which are they have more happening, technically with paint handling and with color and value and often scale. So points for being understated. Appreciate that. And I love how carefully you looked at things. And the one of the things that I wasn't sure I loved, kind of went back and forth about, is that shoestring line that Cornelia brought up. I like that you've got a little bit of a sort of a kick to it, and it adds an element of spice or something unexpected. I'd probably have broken it up a little bit. It could almost feel like an affectation. And then also just taking care of that line of the shoulder as it comes up and hits the jaws, that tangent lines that Ilya was talking about, where you have the line of the neck, the jaw, and the shoulder all intersecting over there. There is an overlap, but maybe perhaps having an element of passage as the shoulder comes up to hit the chin will enable that to really recede. But this is all, splitting hairs. You did a really wonderful job, and deeply appreciate you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Juliette. So, Ilya, would you like to continue to split some of these hairs?
It's so hard to go last because there was a lot that was, and there was really not much contention about this one, so we don't have much to argue about, right? So like I think no, I think it's great, all of that, 100%, like the tone, like how you've compressed the tonality, all that is good. I also go back and forth on that line. On the one hand, I like how it helps flatten everything, like even on top of how flat it all is with the compressed tone. But on the other hand, agreed that it is kind of an affectation. I'm with that. So, and that would be the only affectation. So it feels like oh, I'm looking at so like if there was something else there, at least then if there was some other like extra contrast, we can play with that.
I'm curious, Ilya, what you think. Do you think that the soft edge of the chin is because there's facial hair and that's the way it was handled, or do you think it's just a soft edge? I'm curious about that.
It looks like facial hair, I think. It's nice how that line like moves into it and kind of expands. I do think so. I'll just some critiques, right? I agree the eyes seem small, but maybe they were. I mean, like that's the magic of it, because they do seem small, but they're constructed, especially the eye that we're supposed to be looking at, right? So that you're almost like, well, it could be that way because it looks believable. So that, like, props to you for being convincing. The other eye, though, even though it's in shadow, could have more structure, and I think the cartilage on the nose in general, like the axis of it seems a little off, and I would have just pushed a tiny amount to make sure it stands out from everything else. But that has to be done very carefully. I think the hair, the textural complement to the softness of everything else is nice, but I do feel like it could have been a little bit more like hair and less like a block. Though I like the idea of thinking of it as a block, but I feel like it needs to have, like, there's this quality of Ang here, both in the tonal quality as well as like just the outlines. And Ang was amazing at hair. Like his hair is just, if you want to learn hair, you look at Ang, right? Like
He was amazing.
yeah, but then especially at hair, even better. Well, definitely better than his multi-figural compositions, because that's
Yeah.
maybe wasn't that amazing. You got to lose somewhere, but he was so good. Everything else we're okay with it. But yeah, the ear, the angle of the mandible again. The angle of the mandible is like every portrait I look at, I'm like skull, like, because it's gone everywhere. No one knows where to place it. No one knows how to turn it. So here,
Would that be advice from you, Ilya, to study the skull a bit more?
I think I mean, yes. And also, if I'm not mistaken, Antonio goes to the ARA, where I have to the Academy of Visual Art in Boston, which is a great place with a lot of great people, and I've taught a lot there. So that's awesome that you go there. There's a lot to be gained from that school and all the people there, and they do some really good anatomy stuff there as well. So I'm sure they've started to do more of it, especially. So I think that'll be helpful.
All right. Well, yeah, fantastic. So
this is really good.
Yeah. Yeah, Antonio, congratulations on your first place win. Yeah, awesome work. So, okay, so best design. This is always a fun category. We save it for last. So best design, our first place is Joshua Tepox. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, but yeah, Juliette, would you mind starting us off with your thoughts on Joshua's piece?
Yeah, the organization of the figure on the page, it's not, you've got basically, it's almost a halfway division at the neck if you look between the neck and the hair. And so that's kind of interesting. If it was pushed a little more to the right, it would have been just kind of dead solid halfway, which is kind of interesting with some of the angles pushing off to the right. But it's pretty, I don't know if I would have necessarily placed this one as best design. I think we really just liked it and wanted have a good spot for this piece. I liked the fact that much like the last piece, Antonio's, that we look at, that it's brave to just set up a mirror and look at yourself and not need to add a lot. And so I like that sort of straightforward approach, very simple, and the treatment of the glasses and that big mass of the hair off the left is really nice. And so, there's a simplicity. And so I think altogether, it's that simplicity that I respond to most directly. In terms of critique, you kind of show your hand a little bit, which is what we all do as we're beginning to, explore life drawing and self-portrait drawing. From the angle of the hair up where it bends about the ear, well, not the ear, by the edge of the glasses, is one straight shot from there all the way down to the neck. The straight lines that you use for the cast shadow on the neck and the straightness through the shoulder and the shirt, all that. I just put that same level of care and observation that you're doing in the eye and the glasses and nose into the parts that you care less about. And one of the things my teacher told me when I was a student, which I've relied on a lot over the years, is that you want to take, when I was studying with Jacob Collins in New York years ago, is to take the worst part of your piece, the best part of your piece, and if you do that throughout, then you end up with some of the best work you've ever made. So that's it.
Wow, yeah, it's fantastic advice. Ilya, so you're not last. You can follow up with that.
Yeah, I actually yeah, I think I agree in a way that that design was not like the the kind of the goal here, but that we did want to sort of just keep a piece, like keep this piece, but we couldn't like put it in a very particular place. So regardless, right? It's still good. I'm glad it's here, and I'm glad that there is the kind of it shows a lot of care. It shows a lot of. I mean, and then again, we could say, like, for example, the design of we might as well go there, right? Like, I like the hair instance. Like, I think the contours of it could probably be more interesting just in terms of how they're composed. But at the same time, I like the sort of handling of the lighter values and the darker values. And even though there's sort of like a black area, it sort of connects with the darker side of the head in a good way. There's some interesting things here, which could be to design. This is just a minor thing, but the way you're hatching the background would be the way that I would hatch the background, which does not really match up at all with the way you're working on the head, right? There's no like, it seems like it's a stylistically problematic for me personally, right? Like if you're going to introduce a hatch to that extent, then, and I think there is something, right? Like, but it has to be a little bit more obvious in the head itself, and of course, anatomy, the highlights on the zygomatic need to move up along the temporal.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Ilya, just like with the color in the background, you want to also see some of that color in the foreground. You're talking about unifying the technique of the background to some degree into the foreground as well.
Yeah, I like stylistic unity in that kind of a way. Yeah, because like with a hatch like that, I almost can't even imagine working on hair like this, right? Like where everything is so carefully observed, and then all of a sudden this hatch just seems like you can have a. I'm not even sure. No, the tone in that area is okay, and that's good. At the same time, I would. It's fine. It doesn't necessarily need to be there, but it's good. But I would just calm it all down, like as opposed to putting in like the hatch anywhere else, which I don't think you need because you're already like moving in a very particular stylistic direction. That hatch seems out of place. Yeah, the central line is off though, in the lips especially, but that's cool. That's all good.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of constructive criticism there to work on for Joshua. And Cornelia, could you add your thoughts to this piece, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So congratulations, Joshua. I think that this is a very effective design. I really like the way that you used your hair as well to create a very strong design. That was one of the elements that I find really beautiful about this composition. I also thought that there is a really nice contour actually of the hairline, the way that you designed it, especially like from the past, I would say from the glasses and all the way to the shadow shape side. That's really nice. And you're really getting into some very specific melodies there. And you're actually also using a lot of variation to the edges. So there are some softer forms, and then you are losing the edge a little bit. Around the forehead is a value next to a value, so we don't see any contour there. So we really get the sense that this is receding into the shadow, which is nice. And then it's sort of that contour re-emerges a little bit in this section. So there's some qualities there that I really enjoy. And I also really enjoy that big impression perspective, like looking at the full composition, looking at the design between the darker values and the lighter values, looking how you used your hair to kind of connect these two different elements, shadow shape, light shape side on the portrait. I also like your glasses, and I know that glasses are a little bit tricky to incorporate into a portrait sometimes because you have to work with something that is highly architectural, the perspective have to work, and they are kind of strong, thick rimmed glasses, but I also feel that they're not distracting from the eye, like they do frame your eye. So those are qualities I really like. Actually, I like your composition a lot. Then elements that I would consider. I do think that the edge around the contour of your hair on that side, the melody there is beautiful. Like you get this wavy, thick hair, and kind of it's all groomed a little bit. So you really get the sense of that kind of gesture of the hair kind of coming out. the edge of it is very sharp. I would have liked to see a little bit more atmosphere there. And if you did that, then maybe you wouldn't have to incorporate the value element. I agree with Ilya that you have the value element there, and it almost seemed that you brought that in slightly too soft in that edge slightly, which you could have done without bringing in that value there. And if you brought in like value cross-hatching there, you almost want to have some sprinkle of it in some of the other zones in the portrait also.
Sorry to interrupt you, Cornelia, but Ilya, I think that might be you. Could you reduce your volume a little bit? I think I might be hearing Cornelia bouncing off of your speakers.
Yeah, I'm hearing that somewhere. Yeah.
I think if you just take her volume down.
Okay.
How about now?
All right. I'll just say blah, 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 blah. Okay, that seems to work.
Yeah, bring that down.
There's your critique.
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Did you have a little more to finish that off, or did I derail your?
I do. I have my teaching hat on, so I can go on for a while. I'll cut it up or keep it brief. The connection that you have to the jawline there is great because you have a very specific shadow shape design and then a very rich sequence of dark transitional halftone that quickly move into the light. So there's a nice sense of curvature to that form. Then, so I see your understanding of the shadow shape and the interaction between the shadow and the dark halftones in that area. But then it's lost a little bit in the area of the chin. Search out the shadow shape contour in that area also, and trust that you don't need to have a very dark contrast or a sharp edge. You can keep your shadow shape contour in a very atmospheric way, but just search for that contour because it's bound to be there because you have a shadow shape in half of the portrait, but it's not completely understood. Like especially like from the philtrum down to the chin, there is no shadow shape structure to be had there. And so from far away, it reads, but the moment you come a little bit closer, I'd really like to see that. So that would be my advice moving forward. It's actually to spend a little bit more time on this beautiful self-portrait, find that shadow shape contour, and see if you can also rotate the mouth and the nose a little bit more. So as Ilya pointed out, the anatomy there is not quite in accordance with your center line. So you want to make sure that you get a little bit more of the kind of physical symmetry that will connect with the gesture that you have.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, congratulations, Joshua. Great job. And it sounds like there's a lot there for you to continue. Yeah, to continue to work on. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our second place winner for Best Design.
I'll pass on that.
This is Marietta Sodorova. Hopefully I got that right. So yeah, fantastic piece. Juliette, would you mind starting us off for this piece? Oops, actually, I think you're muted, Juliette.
That might help. One of the things I really liked about this piece, it just felt honest. I mean, it stood out as, sometimes if you get a lot of visual stimulation and then you go into a place that's calm and quiet, it just stands out for being straightforward and unadorned. And there's a boldness in that and a confidence that's appealing, just like when we're hanging out with a very confident, self-assured person. And so I like that. There's elements of line and tone. So we've seen throughout almost all the work, artists balancing, leaving that sort of straight up line work. And we're seeing that in the shirt. You can see the sort of black lines coming through. And then elements which are painted, just these sort of big shapes. So one playing with plane and the other one playing with line. And sometimes that's not brilliantly successful when it gets really pushed to the extremes. And here she's kind of pulling it towards the center, and I like that. I like the coolness of the color and the lights. One thing that I've seen a lot of lately is just dividing things across the center line. If you look at the background on the right hand side, that's almost a straight up division on that between the wall color, the top and half. The top being the lighter background and the bottom being sort of the darker blue. Halfway is the most stable division of any rectangle. And so it's, by its very nature, it's not dynamic. And so you push it a little up or a little bit down and it enlivens quite a bit. So in terms of design, that'd be just one critique. I'm not sure that finger that's under the jaw or thumb underneath that jawline is stands out. I'd almost even just get rid of it. but I like this piece, and I really appreciated you putting it in, and congratulations for winning.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I agree with that too. It sort of was sticking out like a sore thumb a little bit under the jaw there. But
Oh my
yeah. Oh,
you couldn't. You couldn't. I know it was
this
good.
is happening. Ilya, would you mind adding to this and giving us your thoughts?
I like the. I mean, I think that there are some really good painterly qualities in this, right? There's like if there's well, first of all, the color, these harmonies, it seems like it's sort of a very obvious, like, oh, the cool is blue and the warm is sort of ochre or whatnot, or some kind of thing like that. But and yet it's not. Then you move the blue into like all the kind of the grays and it's smart. Like all the color choices are smart. I know I'm a big fan of as kind of what Juliette was talking about with the outlines, and you've kept some of them, and then there's sort of a scumble of paint over something that kind of removes some of them, and then you even keep the edge quality created by that scumble of paint, and then you apply even more opaque paint but flatly. It's like there's a lot going on in terms of that. That's, I think, is very complex and very interesting. And yeah, you kind of like enjoy it as a painting, right? You enjoy it as an abstraction. And I do also think that there is despite maybe some drawing issues in the head and the hand and all that, the ear, it still looks very convincing and alive somehow. And I think that's what kind of stood out to everyone, right? That like we believed in it. And that's very interesting. And I don't even think that it needs to be like, I don't think like it would be hard to correct those issues like the ear, right? Because you don't want to polish the hell out of it, right? Because then it won't really connect well with this sort of technique you have elsewhere. But so like when correcting it, you have to be kind of quite careful about how to go about it, right? It might just be like a tiny change of angle, like just observing a certain contour more accurately, but still keeping it relatively flat as you are doing certain other things, right? Like that's hard to do, but I do think it's alive, right? And what more can we ask from a portrait?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, Cornelia, maybe I can ask you, we talked about this during the last challenge about sometimes the total effect, the total feeling saves what could be technical issues, drawing issues, even like obvious mistakes. Do you think that's what's happening here, where the overall impression is this, it's causing us as the viewer to maybe, have a little latitude when it comes to little things that aren't working?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in terms of drawing and painting, ultimately is a language of communication, and what we are communicating could be emotion, thoughts, stories. And so that has a major impact. And sometimes, even if there is maybe some errors in terms of the drawing, if there's still an exchange between the person portrayed and us, the viewers, that at the end of the day is actually more important, is a little bit more ambiguous. So in the kind of academic environment, it's harder to discuss it, because then we are talking about more vague but still very important and very powerful aspects, like how you translate your personality and create a strong expression in your portrait. There isn't a rule book for that. It's almost ties down to, like, you have to begin that by connecting to what you do and connecting to your work. And that's much more ambiguous than talking about proportions or something technical like that.
Do you think that makes this kind of approach or this kind of style easier or riskier?
This particular painting now?
The style that we're talking about, where you're going for its overall effect. I'm just wondering, as opposed to being tighter or being more academic or being more technically dexterous in the piece. How do you feel about that?
That's a really good question, if I understand you correctly. I think it's actually a really vast element that one can discuss. Now, of course, coming from a very academic background, I'm very maybe biased in that direction also. I believe, with just my own experience, that having that toolkit, having that background, having that skill set, that creates a great sense of freedom and liberty, because we're not restrained by one's limitations. So I think that's essential. At least for myself, I felt I couldn't really convey what I wanted to convey until I knew how to convey it, until I had the tools to be able to do so. So when I look at your self-portrait, Marietta, I mean, the translation of you, I think, is very convincing, is very powerful. And we really get a sense that we have a dialogue, a communication with you, but also that you have been kind of meditating upon yourself, in the reflection of the mirror. So that is really strong. And I think also the composition of the arm in front of your torso, that sense of perspective is really good. And I think you have a very strong linear aspect in especially the arm and the shirt area. And that could risk flattening that perspective a little bit. But then you have also gone a little bit darker, softer, and warmer in the receding area of the shirt. And you actually been able to gain a lot of that perspective, through using those components, which is really strong. So I think we all kind of fell in love with the composition at large and kind of with those areas. At least I did. And also the watch, I think, is gorgeous. The eye contact is there. That's really strong. Now, in terms of the whole painting, I do think that the portrait itself, which is the hardest part after all, is also the area where we see maybe the most amount of struggle, where that shadow shape on the portrait, the division between your light shape and your shadow shape and the half tone, that's not entirely understood. The structure of the ear, I wish you just treated that almost as you treated the texture of the shirt, just looking at it in terms of this overall linear design, some values, and that's it. You didn't have to go in there and try to structure the anatomy if you were not committed enough. It's one of those either or situation. You got to do it or just dial it back and keep it abstract. And then I see a little bit of patchiness in the area around the mouth, where you have been, I can see a little bit of struggle there in terms of kind of figuring out the relationship of color, value, and drawing. And I understand too, like there's sort of this dry element to the painting. So you don't want to necessarily lose the textural element of that by going too far into those areas. But I would consider doing it anyway. If you feel that this painting has momentum still, I would have loved to see maybe just a little bit of quieting down in the receding area of the portrait, and just quiet down a little bit some of the lighter values surrounding the mouth. But overall, I think it's powerful painting and a very strong personality. So congratulations.
Oh, fantastic. So forgive me, Ilya, did you already have your say on this particular piece? I was checking the live chat for a moment.
Yeah.
Okay. my apologies there. Okay, so yeah, congratulations, Marietta.
Keep going.
Let's go ahead and move on to, this is our final winner. This is first place for Best Design. And this is Vinicus Maya. Again, my apologies if I got the name wrong. So yeah, this was a really interesting piece. There was a lot of lively discussion about it. Maybe Cornelia, if you wouldn't mind starting us off with the discussion on this piece.
All right. So I think we all agreed that the overall composition is really strong, and we really enjoyed what you've been doing in terms of having the mirror and having an element of the cup, speaking of the reflection and the foreground, and then you have the cast shadow. So the overall design here, I think, is really playful, and you're really exploring the potential of the space. So that's really beautiful. There's also juxtaposition that happens between the strict sort of lines of the mirror, all symmetrical, the cast shadow of it, very geometrical, to the figure inside of the mirror, you, which is very organic. And I think that is a really nice interaction as well. I really like the way that you have rendered your hand, and you're kind of creating a connection between your arm, your hand, you're holding your sketch pad, like in a very soft and a very relaxed way. So it's a beautiful kind of organic connection there. I think that might be my favorite part actually in this drawing, is the area of the hand, the way that the arm is resting on your leg. Beautiful rendering there, nice shadow shape design. The torso, I think, is also explored in a good way. The arm is a little bit general. You could fish out a little bit more transition, I think, of halftones that could convey a little bit more form there. So just kind of nitpicking a little bit, but the overall sense of structure, I'm convinced by it. I think the anatomy is good. Yeah, so congratulations.
Yeah, fantastic thoughts there. Ilya, my apologies this time. I will be all ears on your response if you don't mind.
No, it's all right. Yeah, the interesting thing about this is that for me personally, it was hard to figure out which category this should go into. It was clear that it should be at the top, but because in terms of technical skill, it just simply requires technical skill to pull something like this off, and I think there is a good amount of just from a technical standpoint of I mean, I always have some sort of anatomical critiques or whatever, but I think it's still right, like how you've composed the whole space, which is a design thing, right? Which is the category that this is for. But also just like how you executed each of the tonal areas, right? There's a lot of technique involved. And then also there's like, you've done this in a way in which the medium is becoming sort of more important than a lot of other pieces here, right? Like you've kept it in this sort of tonality, which is clearly it might be charcoal, but you've kept it a little bit high, so it reads a little. I love like just kind of like everything is done in 2B pencil, and that's it, right? So there's something that like it's as if that's almost like intentional, exaggerated, right? So it was hard to pick, and it's unimportant, right, in a way. But like I just wanted to talk about how it carries the idea in a lot of in all the categories in a way, right? So that's just adding on to the piece, because I think that's just makes it even like conceptually a little stronger in that respect. The cup inside is great, right? Because then it's like we become you, which is cool. Or your friend looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, that was pretty skillfully done too, because the perspective looks like it's outside the center of the cone of vision, but he's still able to correct the ellipses.
And you can feel the slant of the mirror, even though there's no slant at all, right? It's totally it's perfect, almost perfectly in the frame. It's cool. It's very cool. I do think yeah, the hand is a little general, agreed, in terms of tone as well as anatomy. The inner elbow area, whole thing is a little problematic, but I do like everything kind of below the hand, right? Because I think there's like a lot of stuff going on there, and yet it's all within a sort of unified tonal area, which is hard to do, because usually like you unify the darker areas, you flatten them, and you don't really need to worry about them. But here you didn't. You did it just enough, which and also just even the textural application of everything in the self-portrait as opposed to outside of it, right? There's that contrast is also, it's very clever. Overall it's good stuff.
Yeah, so just to clarify, in case people didn't understand, I think what you're saying is that it's unusual that the artist would go into the shadow side, like under the hand, and do so much modeling of form. Is that what you meant?
It's not like there are a lot of like contours and sort of areas of occlusion there, but they're a little like emphasized a little bit more than, let's say, academically common. Like there is almost the entirety of the hand underneath, like, and you could see it, and yet it's not distracting. It's nice. So it's cool. It's nice that was pulled off so well.
Yeah, thank you for your thoughts. Apparently, I'm hearing in the chat right now, a lot of these winners were from Brazil, so I think the Brazilians swept the awards this round.
Nice.
I didn't think we realized, but yeah. So Juliette, if you wouldn't mind, the final comments on this our final first place piece.
Oh, go Brazil!
Yeah.
There's something happening down there. So I really like this piece, and one of the reasons is that it in a way captures for me 2020 more than the 2020 sucks T-shirt, because a lot of people are spending time in their rooms and kind of going a little bit stir crazy. And here you can see someone just picks up a pencil, and what they're able, almost the casualness of
Mm.
someone sitting on their floor, they're not wearing a shirt. I mean, you can see this happening not only in Brazil, but in uh, any bedroom in America. You'll find mirrors sitting up there and people wondering what to do with themselves. And I love okay, this might seem a little bit far fetched, but I'll just say it anyway. Do you know in Renaissance painting where they paint in the tondo shape and you've got this kind of strange orb that happens with the perspective where it kind of swells with Botticelli down, like the angels at the putti at the bottom, and it kind of swells up. And so you can, between the cup, you're looking down, that perspective looking down, and then your eye goes in, kind of like you're inside the orb for the tummy, and then up through the jaw. So you're looking up at the chin and you're looking down in the cup, and it creates this kind of fun house effect you see in other
Like
countries.
behind the looking glass kind of thing.
Yeah, looking glass kind of thing, and it implies that kind of circular shape. I mean, Joshua, can you kind of see it or not really? Can you?
No, yeah. I think.
I think it's a cool observation.
I think so too. It invites you in. The cup sort of invites us into the mirror world in a way.
Yeah, so it's
Compositionally.
kind of, an ellipse heading back in space with all those right angles. It kind of creates a sense of movement. So I like the casualness of it. I like the composition. To me, there's a message implied in it, and captures a moment in time. Um, the right hand quarter of the vertical composition from top to bottom, it doesn't add anything, doesn't detract a whole lot, but it doesn't add a whole lot. But all in all, it was really a nice piece to end on. You deserve your first place win.
Yeah, fantastic work, Vinicius. So I'm just as a final thought on this piece, I love the ambition of it, because obviously at New Masters Academy we're teaching figure, head, we're teaching construction, composition, perspective. You've got so much of what we teach all in one piece. And one of the first pieces as well, I felt the same thing with Pedro, where it was like we're just putting so much into it. And I think it was very much in the spirit of this challenge. So fantastic work. Congratulations to all the winners. If you're just tuning in, I know some people have commented and you have no idea about these challenges. We're doing a monthly challenge at New Masters Academy. The December challenge has already begun. This is a master study challenge where you are downloading a PDF with 40 master images that we've chosen for you, and you're choosing 3 to do a master study of, and you're submitting those. And so it's a very useful exercise. It's a very useful way to learn beyond just being a challenge or the opportunity to win. So if you're interested in that, check the description in our YouTube video, and you're going to see a link to our Discord so that you can join the New Masters community on Discord. Thank you to all of our judges. I know that all 3 of them are incredibly busy people, and this was a very generous of their time, and we appreciate it. Congratulations to the winners. And I have to say, if you are watching this and you didn't get picked, there was a lot of right on the knife edge kind of decisions that had to be made. There was a lot of strong work that was submitted, and it's very possible you just barely didn't make it, but I do encourage you to continue to participate. Obviously, this is a challenge, not a contest. It's about learning, and so as long as you are pushing yourself and you're getting better, I think that that's something that you should continue to do. So we really look forward to seeing your submissions for this next challenge. And again, thank you, everybody, and I really appreciate it. All of us do, I'm sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
And congratulations to everybody.
Yeah, congratulations. Big applause.
Yeah, really big applause. All right, you guys. So I guess we'll sign off now. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're out.